In front of his mistress, a doctor, he made a point of belittling his pregnant wife for not having a degree. But at the university event, an official announcement made everyone turn to her and instantly shut him up. The crisp October air carried the scent of fallen leaves as the lights of Massachusetts General Hospital's grand ballroom spilled onto the cobblestone courtyard. Black town cars lined the circular drive, disgorging Boston's elite in evening wear worth more than most Americans' monthly salaries. Among them, Thaddeus Harmon straightened his bow tie with practiced precision, his reflection captured in the polished glass doors. "Ready?" he asked, turning to Melody, his pregnant wife who was adjusting her emerald dress. "As I'll ever be," she replied with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. At 6 months pregnant, these events had become increasingly taxing, though she'd never admit it to Thaddeus. He needed her here, his wife, his support, the curator of their social image. Inside, the hospital's annual neuroscience fundraiser transformed the austere medical institution into a glittering showcase of wealth and influence. Crystal chandeliers cast honeyed light over professors, surgeons, tech entrepreneurs, and old-money Bostonians who viewed philanthropy as both social obligation and competitive sport. "Thaddeus Harmon," boomed Dr. Lawrence Chen, chief of neurosurgery, approaching with 2 flutes of champagne. "The man who's revolutionizing neural interface technology, and the lovely Melody," he added, quickly exchanging 1 champagne for sparkling water before handing it to her. "How's our little future Harvard graduate?" "Kicking like a soccer player," Melody responded warmly. She'd grown accustomed to the presumption that any child of Thaddeus Harmon would inevitably join the ranks of the Ivy League. Thaddeus placed his hand briefly on the small of her back. Melody curated the rare book collection for tonight's silent auction, already generated over 50,000 in bids. Dr. Chen raised his eyebrows, genuinely impressed. "Remarkable. You have quite the eye for literary treasures." "Just a passion project," Melody said modestly, though the collection had required months of work, leveraging connections she'd built over years running her boutique bookstore in Cambridge. "More than a passion," Thaddeus interjected. "Melody has a knack for spotting overlooked value." There was pride in his voice, a reminder of why she'd fallen in love with him 5 years ago. Back then, her lack of college degree hadn't seemed to matter to the Harvard-educated tech prodigy. As Dr. Chen was called away, Thaddeus scanned the room with the calculated awareness of someone mapping power dynamics. At 38, he carried himself with the assurance of a man who had already achieved what others spent lifetimes pursuing. His company, Quantum Nexus Technologies, had pioneered breakthroughs in brain-computer interfaces that promised to revolutionize treatment for neurological disorders, and had made him wealthy enough to silence any whispers about his modest Midwestern origins. "The Dean of Medicine wants a word," he murmured to Melody. "Will you be all right for a moment? I've been managing social events since you were debugging code in your Harvard dorm," she teased, earning a quick smile before he disappeared into the crowd. Melody watched him go, appreciating how effortlessly he worked the room. Here a firm handshake with a potential investor, there a knowing nod to a university department chair. Thaddeus collected connections like rare coins, carefully categorizing their potential value. A wave of nausea suddenly washed over her, a reminder that pregnancy didn't respect social calendars. Melody quietly slipped away to find the restroom. When she emerged several minutes later, feeling somewhat steadier, the ballroom's configuration had subtly shifted. New centers of gravity had formed around key figures, and one in particular drew Melody's attention. A striking woman in a navy dress, surrounded by an admiring circle of hospital board members. She was tall, with dark hair swept into an elegant knot, her posture embodying the peculiar confidence of those who've never questioned their place in rooms of power. Something about her sparked recognition in Melody, though she was certain they'd never met. Then she saw Thaddeus approaching the woman, his face illuminated by an expression Melody rarely witnessed anymore, genuine excitement rather than the polished enthusiasm he manufactured for donors and investors. The woman turned, spotting Thaddeus, and her composed features transformed into delighted surprise. They embraced not the perfunctory social air kiss of Boston galas, but a genuine hug between people with shared history. "Val, I can't believe it," Thaddeus was saying as Melody approached. "When did you get back from London?" 3 weeks ago, the woman replied, her voice carrying the faintest trace of an accent Melody couldn't place. "Massachusetts General made an offer I couldn't refuse." Head of neurosurgical research with my own lab and staff. They're lucky to have you. Your paper on neural regeneration in that British journal was brilliant. The woman's laugh was warm and intimate. You actually read it? I'm flattered, Thad. Most CEOs wouldn't bother with the technical details. Thad. No one called him that. Not his mother, not his college friends, and certainly not Melody. He had always insisted on Thaddeus, claiming the full 3 syllables carried more gravitas in boardrooms. Melody stepped closer, and Thaddeus finally seemed to notice her presence. Melody, there you are. Come meet Dr. Valerie Sloan. We were at Harvard together, same neuroscience program. Valerie, my wife, Melody. Valerie's assessment was subtle but unmistakable. A quick glance that catalogued Melody's simple updo, her pregnant figure, her lack of medical insignia or academic pins that distinguished most attendees. The famous Melody, Valerie said, extending a hand adorned with a single platinum bangle. How lovely to meet you at last. Thad mentioned you run a bookshop. A specialized rare book dealership, Thaddeus corrected swiftly. Melody has built quite a reputation among collectors. The slight emphasis on reputation rang in Melody's ears, the unspoken contrast to Valerie's credentials and publications. How fascinating, Valerie said with practiced interest. I've always admired those who pursue their passions outside traditional paths. Her gaze flicked briefly to Melody's pregnant belly. And now embarking on motherhood as well. You must be thrilled. Before Melody could respond, a distinguished older man approached, his MIT lapel pin catching the light. Dr. Sloan, forgive the interruption, but the president of the American Neurological Association is eager to discuss your recent findings. Valerie nodded graciously. Duty calls. Thad, we should catch up properly. My team is exploring some applications that might align perfectly with your neural interfaces. Absolutely. Let's set something up next week. I'll have my assistant contact yours. Valerie turned to Melody with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Wonderful meeting you. Best of luck with the little one. As Valerie glided away, Melody observed how Thaddeus watched her, a gaze containing something beyond professional admiration. You never mentioned her before, Melody said quietly. Thaddeus seemed to return from somewhere distant. Oh, Valerie, we weren't particularly close in school, competitive department. He checked his watch. The auction closes in 20 minutes. Should we check on your books? Throughout the remainder of the evening, Melody found her attention repeatedly drawn to Valerie Sloan. The neurosurgeon moved through conversations with effortless authority, dropping references to international conferences and prestigious journals. Occasionally, Melody caught Thaddeus watching Valerie as well, his expression unguarded in those unobserved moments. Later that night, as they drove home to their Cambridge Victorian, Melody broke the silence. You and Valerie seemed more than just classmates. Thaddeus kept his eyes on the road. What do you mean? The way you interact. There's history there. He sighed with the particular patience he reserved for conversations he found unnecessary. We competed for the same research grants, published in the same journals. Academic rivalry creates a certain bond. She called you Thad. A muscle in his jaw twitched. Some college friends did. It doesn't mean anything. You hate being called Thad. You corrected the governor when he called you that last year? That was different, professional context. His tone sharpened. Why are we dissecting this? Valerie is a brilliant researcher whose work complements Quantum Nexus's goals. If we can establish a partnership, it could advance our neural interface trials by years. The familiar pivot to business, Thaddeus's refuge, whenever personal conversations grew uncomfortable. I'm not questioning her credentials, Melody said carefully. I'm observing that seeing her affected you. This is ridiculous, he snapped, turning into their driveway with unnecessary force. I'm excited about a potential professional collaboration, and you're manufacturing some soap opera narrative. The accusations stung. Throughout their marriage, Melody had been the one who smoothed social waters, who remembered colleagues' children's names, who made their home a showcase for entertaining the investors and academics Thaddeus needed to impress. She'd never been the one to create drama. Inside their meticulously restored Victorian, Thaddeus immediately retreated to his home office, a book-lined sanctuary where framed diplomas and awards covered one entire wall. Melody paused in the doorway, watching as he poured himself 2 fingers of scotch. Were you in love with her? The question emerged before she could reconsider. Thaddeus froze, then slowly placed the crystal tumbler down. That was 20 years ago, Melody. The non-denial hung in the air between them. Why didn't you ever tell me about her? Because it wasn't relevant. College relationships rarely are. He loosened his bow tie with sharp, angry movements. Whatever existed between Valerie and me ended before graduation. She went to Johns Hopkins for medical school. I stayed to complete my PhD, end of story. But something in his defensive posture suggested it wasn't the end, perhaps merely a pause in a narrative that had unexpectedly resumed. The next morning, Melody found a business card on the kitchen counter. Dr. Valerie Sloan, Director of Neurosurgical Research, with a personal cell number scrawled on the back. She turned it over in her hands, noting the prestigious hospital logo and the list of credentials after Valerie's name. MD, PhD, Fax, FANS. Thaddeus entered, already dressed for work despite the early hour. I've got a breakfast meeting downtown, then back-to-back calls until dinner. The Tokyo Neural Tech Conference sent over their speaker invitation. I'd need to be there the second week of November. Melody placed the card down. November? But I'm due in December, Thad. What if something happens while you're halfway around the world? Nothing will happen. First babies are almost always late anyway. He kissed her cheek distractedly. We'll discuss it later. I'm running late. After he left, Melody stood alone in their gourmet kitchen, sunlight streaming through leaded glass windows onto marble countertops. Their home was a showcase of success, historic architecture updated with modern luxury, every detail curated to project the image of intellectual prosperity. Her phone chimed with a calendar notification. Thaddeus, lunch meeting with Dr. Sloan, 12:30 p.m. A meeting he hadn't mentioned. 2 weeks passed, during which Thaddeus worked increasingly late hours and mentioned Valerie's name with growing frequency. Valerie thinks, Valerie suggested. According to Valerie's research, the neurosurgeon had become a regular presence in their conversations, though Melody had not seen her since the fundraiser. After a routine prenatal appointment at Massachusetts General, Melody decided to surprise Thaddeus with lunch at his favorite cafe near the hospital. As she approached the restaurant, she spotted him through the window sitting across from Valerie Sloan. They were leaning toward each other, Valerie's hand occasionally touching Thaddeus's arm for emphasis as she spoke. More striking than the physical contact was Thaddeus's expression, animated, engaged, almost boyish in his enthusiasm. It had been months since Melody had seen that particular light in his eyes when looking at her. Before she could decide whether to enter, Thaddeus looked up and saw her through the window. The transformation was immediate, the light in his eyes extinguished, replaced by something that looked uncomfortably like guilt. He said something to Valerie, then quickly met Melody outside. "What are you doing here?" he asked, his tone caught between surprise and accusation. "I had my checkup. Thought I'd surprise you with lunch." She nodded toward the cafe. "But you're busy. Valerie and I are discussing the integration of our neural interface with her surgical protocols. It's a complex, technical conversation." "I see." Melody maintained her composure through years of practice navigating Boston's social hierarchies. "Don't let me interrupt. Dr. Frost says everything looks good with the baby, by the way." Thaddeus had the grace to look abashed. "I'm glad. I should have remembered your appointment." "Yes, you should have." She turned to leave, then paused. "Will you be home for dinner tonight? I have a late meeting with investors. Don't wait up." That night, Melody sat alone in their living room, surrounded by first editions she'd collected over years building her business. Books had always been her refuge, worlds where value wasn't determined by degrees or professional titles. She found herself staring at the framed wedding photo on the mantel. Thaddeus looked younger, less polished but more genuine. His arm was wrapped proudly around her waist, his expression devoid of the calculation that had gradually become his default. What had changed? When had his ambition hardened into something colder? Or had it always been there, masked by the intensity of new love? Thaddeus arrived home after midnight, his key turning quietly in the lock. He seemed startled to find Melody still awake. "You should be resting," he said, loosening his tie. "I've been thinking about us," she replied. "About how we've changed," he sighed, pouring himself a drink. "It's late, Melody. Can this wait until morning?" "No, it can't. I need to know what's happening with you and Valerie." "Nothing is happening. We're colleagues exploring a professional partnership." "Is that why you forgot my doctor's appointment today? Why you've worked late every night this week? Why you suddenly need to go to Tokyo weeks before our baby is due?" "This is exactly why I don't share details about my work," he snapped. "You turn business into melodrama." "This isn't about business, Thaddeus. It's about the way you look at her, The way you've stopped looking at me." He set his glass down with deliberate control. "You're emotional because of the pregnancy. Seeing threats that don't exist." "Don't." Melody's voice hardened. "Don't dismiss me with hormones. I deserve more respect than that." Something in her tone seemed to penetrate his defenses. He sat heavily on the couch across from her, suddenly looking exhausted. "What do you want me to say, Melody? That I enjoy talking with Valerie? That it's refreshing to discuss neural pathways with someone who understands every nuance without explanation? That doesn't mean I'm having an affair, but you're drawn to her." The seconds of his hesitation before denying it told Melody everything. "We have history," he finally admitted. "Intellectual connection has always been important to me. You know that." The implication hung in the air between them, that Melody, with her bookstore and self-education, couldn't provide the intellectual stimulation he craved. "I've never tried to be something I'm not," she said quietly. "You knew who I was when you married me. And you knew who I was. Someone dedicated to advancing in fields where credentials and peer recognition matter. Valerie understands that world. And I don't." He didn't contradict her. Melody placed a protective hand over her pregnant belly, suddenly aware of the precariousness of everything she'd believed secure. The baby kicked against her palm, a reminder of what was truly at stake. "I'm going to bed," she said, rising carefully. "But this conversation isn't over, Thaddeus. Something is happening whether you admit it or not, and I won't pretend otherwise for the sake of your comfort." As she climbed the stairs alone, Melody felt a fundamental shift in the foundation of their marriage, like the first hairline crack in fine porcelain, nearly invisible but irreversible, promising that under sufficient pressure, everything would eventually shatter. The November rain lashed against the windows of Melody's bookstore, Cambridge Literary Treasures, as she carefully examined a leather-bound first edition of Thoreau's Walden. The shop's warm lighting and scent of old paper normally brought her peace, but today even this sanctuary couldn't calm her racing thoughts. "Ms. Wilcox?" her assistant called from the front counter. "There's someone here to see you." Melody looked up to find Evelyn Prescott standing in the doorway to the rare books room, impeccably dressed in a tailored wool coat, her silver hair arranged in a perfect bob. Thaddeus's mother surveyed the shop with the practiced assessment of someone accustomed to assigning value to everything. "Evelyn," Melody said, masking her surprise. In 5 years of marriage, her mother-in-law had visited the bookstore exactly once, during the week before their wedding, when she'd made barely concealed comments about charming hobbies and temporary career phases. "I was at a faculty luncheon nearby," Evelyn explained, removing leather gloves. As Professor Emerita of Economics at Harvard, she still maintained an office on campus and served on various boards. "Thought I'd stop by since I couldn't reach Thaddeus." Melody wasn't surprised. Thaddeus had been increasingly unreachable over the past 3 weeks, his calendar mysteriously filled with meetings that couldn't be rescheduled and dinners that ran late into the evening. "He's in meetings all day," Melody replied, placing the Thoreau back in its protective case. "Can I offer you some tea?" Evelyn nodded, following Melody to the small sitting area at the back of the shop. Unlike her son, who fidgeted when forced to stay still, Evelyn sat with perfect posture, ankles crossed as if posing for an oil portrait. "How are the renovations at the house?" she asked after they settled with their tea. "Nearly finished. The nursery is done, just waiting on the custom bookshelves." "Books already," Evelyn noted with a thin smile. Thaddeus had a custom periodic table painted on his nursery wall. By 3, he could recite half the elements. The comment, like so many from Evelyn, carried the subtle reminder that intellectual achievement was the Prescott-Harmon family currency, and anything less was failure. "I saw Valerie Sloan at last week's medical school gala," Evelyn continued, watching Melody over the rim of her teacup. "Brilliant woman. She and Thaddeus were quite the academic power couple at Harvard before she left for Johns Hopkins." Melody carefully set down her cup to hide the tremor in her hands. "Power couple?" Thaddeus mentioned they were classmates, but he never said they dated. 4 years all through undergraduate. Everyone expected an engagement before graduate programs separated them. Evelyn studied Melody's face. "He never told you? How interesting." Before Melody could respond, her phone chimed with a text from Thaddeus. "Hosting dinner for investors tonight at house. 7 p.m. Chef already arranged. Wear the blue dress?" Melody stared at the screen. No question if she was available. No consideration that arranging a dinner party typically took her days of preparation. "Trouble?" Evelyn inquired, not bothering to hide her curiosity. "Just Thaddeus. Hosting a last-minute dinner tonight. Melody forced a smile. Business as usual. That's what makes him successful, seizing opportunities. Evelyn gathered her gloves. I should let you get back to your customers. She glanced pointedly around the empty shop. After Evelyn left, Melody called Thaddeus, who didn't pick up until her third attempt. I'm in meetings all day, he answered tersely. Is something wrong with the baby? No, but your mother just stopped by the shop and mentioned something interesting about you and Valerie Sloan being a power couple for 4 years at Harvard. Silence stretched across the line. It wasn't relevant, he finally said. Ancient history. 4 years of your life wasn't relevant to share with your wife. It didn't end well. I don't enjoy discussing failures. And tonight's dinner? When were you planning to tell me about that? I just did. The Tokyo investors are in town for one night only. This could mean major funding for the neural interface clinical trials. And who else will be there? Another pause. Various stakeholders. Why? Will Dr. Sloan be attending? She's a key partner in the clinical application. Of course she'll be there. His tone sharpened. Is that a problem? It would have been nice to know I'd be hosting your ex-girlfriend along with Tokyo investors on 2 hours' notice. This is business, Melody, not some undergraduate drama. She heard voices in the background. I have to go. The caterers will handle everything. Just be there to welcome our guests. The line went dead. Melody arrived home to find the house transformed by a small army of staff. Floral arrangements adorned every surface. Catering personnel efficiently converted their dining room into a showcase of fine china and crystal, and a string quartet set up in the living room. Her attempt to oversee final preparations was quickly rebuffed by the head caterer. Mr. Harmon gave us very specific instructions, Mrs. Harmon. Everything is under control. Relegated to the role of guest in her own home, Melody retreated upstairs to change into the requested blue dress, which fit more snugly around her 7-month belly than when Thaddeus had last seen her wear it. At precisely 6:45, the front door opened. Thaddeus entered with 2 Japanese businessmen, followed by Valerie Sloan, whose tailored burgundy dress and subtle diamond earrings exuded effortless sophistication. Gentlemen, this is my wife, Melody, Thaddeus said, kissing her cheek perfunctorily. Melody, Mr. Tanaka and Dr. Ito from the Tokyo Neural Research Institute. She greeted them warmly in Japanese, having studied basic phrases after Thaddeus mentioned potential Asian investors months ago. Their pleased surprise was evident. But before she could engage further, Thaddeus steered the conversation toward the house's historical architecture. Darling, would you check on the champagne? He suggested, effectively dismissing her to the kitchen. As more guests arrived, hospital administrators, research directors, venture capitalists, Melody noticed how Thaddeus positioned Valerie centrally, highlighting her research while minimizing Melody's role to that of hostess rather than partner. During dinner, the conversation inevitably turned to credentials and affiliations, that peculiar academic currency of name-dropping institutions and journals. The difference between merely interesting research and truly groundbreaking work, Thaddeus was saying, is rigorous peer review and institutional support. Isn't that right, Valerie? Valerie nodded, her expression serious. Absolutely. My team at Massachusetts General benefits from Harvard Medical School's protocols. You simply can't replicate that level of excellence without proper academic scaffolding. That's what I always tell my graduate students, added Dr. Chen from the hospital board. Credentials open doors that talent alone cannot. Melody watched Thaddeus nod emphatically. There's something about having your name printed on paper, timbered from a renowned institution, that defines who you truly are. The comment hung in the air as several guests glanced uncomfortably at Melody, whose lack of degree was well known in their circle. And what was your field of study, Mrs. Harmon? Inquired Mr. Tanaka politely. Before she could answer, Thaddeus interjected, Melody has always been more practical. Not everyone is suited for academia. I find there's much to learn outside classroom walls, Melody replied, maintaining her composure. Though I left college early to care for my father during his illness, I've never stopped educating myself. Self-education is admirable, Valerie commented with practiced sympathy. Though lacking the structure and rigor of formal programs, I imagine it's rather like comparing homeopathy to actual medicine. Several guests chuckled, and Melody felt her cheeks burn. Actually, she began, many of history's most influential thinkers were self-taught. Melody sources the most extraordinary rare books, Thaddeus interrupted, shifting the topic. Speaking of extraordinary, Valerie's recent paper on neural regeneration has been nominated for the Lasker Award. As dessert was served, Melody excused herself to check on the coffee service, needing a moment away from the subtle academic one-upmanship at the table. In the butler's pantry, she steadied herself against the counter, breathing deeply as the baby kicked vigorously. "I know," she whispered, placing a hand on her belly. "I feel it too." Voices drifted in from the nearby powder room, Thaddeus and Valerie, speaking in low tones. "We need to be more discreet," Thaddeus was saying. "Melody's already suspicious." "You worry too much," Valerie replied. "She doesn't move in our professional circles. Who would tell her? It's not just about being seen together. She senses something's changed." "Because it has," Valerie's voice softened. "Being back in Boston, working with you again, it's like no time has passed. The connection we had—" "I know," Thaddeus interrupted. "It's intoxicating talking to someone who truly understands the work, the pressure, the world we inhabit. You deserve a partner who's your intellectual equal, Thad. It's not that simple," he sighed. "There's the baby to consider. Children adapt. My colleague divorced last year and his kids are thriving." Melody froze, the coffee service forgotten as the full implication of their conversation registered. This wasn't just professional collaboration or rekindled friendship. They were discussing a future, one that didn't include her. The dinner concluded shortly before midnight, with the Tokyo investors expressing enthusiastic support for the neural interface project. As the last guests departed, Thaddeus loosened his tie with an expression of triumph. "That went perfectly," he declared. "Tanaka practically committed to full funding before leaving." Melody stood in the foyer, still as stone. "When were you going to tell me? About the funding? I just did. About you and Valerie planning your post-divorce life." Thaddeus went still, his expression shuddering. "You were eavesdropping. In my own home, yes." Melody's voice trembled despite her effort to remain calm. "Were you ever going to tell me you're having an affair? Or just wait until after our child is born to announce you're leaving? You're being dramatic. Valerie and I are colleagues with history. We've been discussing potential scenarios for the research partnership, that's all." "Stop lying." The force of her own voice surprised her. "I heard you. Children adapt. Divorced last year. You're planning a future with her." Thaddeus's demeanor shifted from defensive to coldly analytical. "This isn't how I wanted to have this conversation." "So you admit it," he exhaled slowly. "There's a connection with Valerie that I can't ignore, an intellectual compatibility that makes everything else in life sharper, more vibrant. And 5 years of marriage, our child, those are just inconvenient complications?" "I didn't say that," he snapped. "But you have to admit, we've grown apart. You're focused on the baby and the bookstore. I'm working on technology that could change millions of lives. So my priorities are trivial compared to yours?" "Not trivial, just different." He ran a hand through his hair. "It's exhausting constantly simplifying complex concepts just to have a conversation at home." The casual cruelty of the statement struck Melody like a physical blow. "Is that how you see our relationship? Me holding you back from meaningful intellectual exchange?" "Sometimes, yes." His mask slipped, revealing frustration. "Do you know how refreshing it is to discuss neural pathway theories without having to stop and explain basic terminologies? To reference a journal article and have the other person not only recognize it, but offer substantive critique? That's what I have with Valerie." "And what do you have with me?" Melody asked quietly. Thaddeus hesitated, and in that pause, Melody heard everything he couldn't bring himself to say. "I care about you," he finally offered. "You've been a supportive wife." "A supportive wife," she repeated, "like a well-designed chair, functional but not essential." "That's not what I meant." "It's exactly what you meant." Tears threatened, but she refused to let them fall. "You see me as intellectually inferior because I don't have letters after my name. A pleasant companion for social events, but not someone who challenges you. This isn't about your education. It's entirely about that." Her voice rose. "You said it yourself. Intellectual compatibility. What you really mean is you want someone with the same pedigree, someone who validates your self-image as an academic elite." A sharp pain lanced through her abdomen, and Melody gasped, doubling over. "Melody?" Thaddeus's anger vanished, replaced by alarm. Another pain, stronger this time. She clutched her belly, feeling warm liquid on her legs. "Something's wrong," she whispered, panic rising. The baby... Thaddeus was already reaching for his phone, calling 911 with one hand while supporting her with the other. "It's too early," Melody repeated as he helped her to the couch. "It's too early." In the hospital emergency room, monitors beeped steadily as doctors examined Melody. Thaddeus paced the small area beside her bed, his earlier coldness replaced by genuine concern. "Braxton Hicks contractions, exacerbated by extreme stress," explained Dr. Frost, reviewing the monitor readings. "The bleeding is from a small placental irritation, but nothing that indicates serious detachment. We'll keep you overnight for observation, but I'm not concerned about imminent labor." Relief flooded Melody's face. "The baby's okay. Strong heartbeat, good movement. But," Dr. Frost looked pointedly at both of them, "you need to avoid stress for the remainder of your pregnancy. No exceptions." After the doctor left, silence filled the hospital room. Thaddeus stood at the window, looking out at the Boston skyline illuminated in pre-dawn light. "I'm sorry," he finally said, not turning around. "I never wanted to cause you physical harm." The careful phrasing struck Melody. Physical harm specifically, not emotional. "What happens now?" she asked. "We focus on your health and the baby's. Everything else," he trailed off, "can wait until after I've delivered your child." The bitterness in her voice was new, a protective shell forming around her wounded heart. Thaddeus finally faced her, his expression conflicted. "That's not fair." "None of this is fair, Thaddeus." She placed both hands protectively over her belly. "I thought we were building a life together. Instead, you've been planning an exit strategy with your college girlfriend. It's more complicated than that. It always is when you're the one doing the betraying." She closed her eyes, suddenly exhausted. "I need to rest," the doctor said, to avoid stress. He approached the bed hesitantly. "Do you want me to stay?" "No." The word emerged softer than she intended. "I need space to think," he nodded, gathering his coat. At the door, he paused. "I'll have your overnight bag brought from home. Call if you need anything." After he left, Melody lay in the sterile hospital room, listening to the steady heartbeat of her unborn daughter on the monitor. The sound anchored her as her mind raced through the wreckage of her marriage. Whatever happened next, she knew one absolute truth: nothing would ever be the same again. Weak December sunlight filtered through Cambridge Literary Treasures windows as Melody sorted through a newly acquired collection of early American poetry. The familiar ritual of examining bindings and checking first edition markers provided small comfort as her mind repeatedly returned to her fractured marriage. 3 days had passed since her hospital stay, and Thaddeus had retreated into a careful performance of concern, checking on her health, ensuring she ate properly while systematically avoiding any discussion of Valerie or their future. He slept in the guest room, citing concern for her rest, though they both recognized the convenient distance it created. The bell above the shop door jingled, pulling Melody from her thoughts. Margaret, her assistant, greeted the customer while Melody continued cataloging in the back room. A moment later, Margaret appeared in the doorway. "Mrs. Prescott Harmon is here to see you again," she whispered, eyes wide with curiosity. 2 visits in 1 month from her formidable mother-in-law constituted a statistical anomaly. Evelyn stood examining a glass-enclosed display of feminist first editions, her camel hair coat and pearls incongruously formal among the shop's comfortable academic clutter. "Evelyn," Melody greeted her, "twice in 1 month, should I be concerned?" Something approximating a smile crossed Evelyn's face. "I've brought tea," she said, producing a small paper bag from a nearby cafe. "Earl Grey for you, caffeine-free, of course." The unexpected thoughtfulness caught Melody off guard. They settled in the reading nook, steaming cups between them. Neither spoke immediately. The silence waited with unasked questions. "Thaddeus mentioned you had a hospital scare," Evelyn finally said. "Are you recovered?" "Physically, yes." Melody touched her belly absently. "Emotionally is more complicated." Evelyn's gaze sharpened. "Because of Valerie Sloan, I presume." Melody's cup paused midway to her lips. "You know, Boston academic circles are rather incestuous, dear. Whispers travel quickly in those hallowed halls." Evelyn set her cup down precisely. "I knew the moment she returned from London that trouble would follow." "He's in love with her," Melody said quietly. "He always has been." "No." Evelyn's response was immediate and surprisingly forceful. "Thaddeus isn't in love with Valerie. He's in love with what she represents. Validation from the academic establishment he's never fully felt part of, despite his success." Melody considered this perspective. Because of his Midwestern roots? I thought Harvard had erased that insecurity. Harvard exacerbated it, Evelyn corrected. Thaddeus arrived on scholarship among classmates from prep schools who treated Boston as their birthright. He compensated by outperforming everyone academically. Valerie came from similar privilege as his classmates, but respected his intellect. Their relationship validated his belonging. And I don't provide that validation, Melody concluded. You provide something more authentic, which ironically, he values less. Evelyn reached into her handbag and extracted a manila envelope. My son is making a catastrophic mistake based on incomplete information. I've decided to intervene. She placed the envelope on the table between them. As a Harvard regent, I have access to certain administrative archives. These documents aren't easily accessible to the public. Melody hesitated before touching the envelope. What is this? Information about Dr. Valerie Sloan that Thaddeus should know before tying his professional and personal future to hers. Evelyn's expression hardened. 3 years ago, while at London's Royal Neurological Institute, Valerie was involved in a significant research scandal. A junior colleague accused her of appropriating his experimental protocol and data for her groundbreaking paper on neural regeneration. The paper Thaddeus keeps praising, Melody murmured. Indeed, the institute launched an investigation, but before it concluded, a generous donation from Valerie's family foundation resulted in the matter being quietly dismissed. The accuser accepted a position at a small university in Wales with an unprecedented research budget. She bought her way out of a plagiarism scandal, Melody summarized, opening the envelope to find internal memos, copies of the original complaint, and financial records. The British medical establishment closed ranks to protect one of their star researchers, but the whispers followed her. Her sudden return to Boston wasn't a prestigious recruitment, it was a strategic retreat. Evelyn reclaimed her tea. My son is too enchanted by her credentials to have done proper due diligence. Why are you sharing this with me and not him? Because Thaddeus wouldn't believe it coming from me. He'd assume I was interfering as usual. Evelyn studied Melody with unexpected intensity. You, however, have resources he doesn't suspect. My book connections, I don't see how that helps. Not the books themselves, but the networks you've built around them. Evelyn gestured to the shop. You've cultivated relationships with scholars, researchers, and collectors worldwide. You authenticate historical documents for major universities. Your expertise in verifying authenticity could be redirected. The implication hung in the air between them. You want me to investigate Valerie's research, Melody said slowly. I want you to verify what these documents suggest, that the pioneering work giving Valerie her current status may be built on intellectual theft. Evelyn stood, gathering her things. What you do with that information is your choice. As Evelyn reached the door, she turned back. You should know that Harvard is planning a major event in January, the inauguration of their new neurological research center. Valerie will be the keynote speaker, presenting her groundbreaking work. Thaddeus must be thrilled, Melody said, unable to keep the bitterness from her voice. He's on the organizing committee, Evelyn confirmed, along with several potential investors for his neural interface technology. After Evelyn departed, Melody sat motionless, the envelope of damning documents before her. The shop's silence enveloped her as she weighed her options. She could confront Thaddeus with this information, but his recent behavior suggested he'd dismiss it as jealousy or desperation. She could do nothing, accepting the inevitable dissolution of her marriage with dignity, or she could verify these allegations herself. Later that evening, Melody sat in her small home office adjacent to the nursery, laptop open to a secure email client rarely used since her father's death. As executor of his estate, she'd maintained his academic correspondences and professional relationships out of respect for his legacy. Now those connections might provide unexpected leverage. She drafted a careful email to Professor Martin Halloway at Oxford, an old colleague of her father's who specialized in research ethics. Without naming Valerie directly, she outlined the situation and asked about accessing British academic investigation records. Within an hour, his reply arrived. My dear Melody, your inquiry touches on a matter I'm familiar with, though discretion prevents direct confirmation. The researcher in question has a reputation for building on others' work without proper attribution. The recent London situation wasn't isolated. Similar whispers followed her from Johns Hopkins. Her current research on neural regeneration contains methodological approaches suspiciously similar to unpublished work by Dr. Chen's team at MGH before her arrival. Your father would be proud of your integrity in this matter. If documentation would be helpful, I can connect you with researchers who have relevant information. Regards, Martin. Melody read the email twice, her heart racing. This wasn't just one covered-up incident, but a pattern of academic misconduct. If Martin was correct about Valerie appropriating Dr. Chen's methodologies, the current partnership between Massachusetts General and Quantum Nexus could implode spectacularly, taking Thaddeus's company with it. Over the next week, as Christmas decorations appeared throughout Cambridge, Melody conducted her investigation with methodical precision. Her experience authenticating rare manuscripts had honed her ability to trace provenance and identify inconsistencies. Each day after closing the shop, she gathered information: research papers predating Valerie's breakthrough, interview transcripts from former lab assistants, peer review comments questioning specific methodological claims. She worked in secret, careful not to alert Thaddeus, who grew increasingly distant as her pregnancy advanced. He attended Christmas parties and business dinners without her, citing concern for her condition while posting photos on social media that occasionally included Valerie in group settings. On December 23rd, Melody sat across from Professor Diana Winters in a quiet corner of the Harvard Faculty Club. The diminutive history professor had been Melody's most trusted authentication consultant for years, verifying the provenance of literary manuscripts for collectors and museums. "I must say this is outside my usual wheelhouse," Diana remarked, reviewing the documents Melody had compiled. "Literary forgeries are my specialty, not scientific misconduct." "But the principles are the same," Melody pointed out, tracing ideas to their source, identifying patterns in attribution, recognizing when someone claims originality inappropriately. "True enough?" Diana adjusted her glasses. "And based on what you've shown me, Doctor, Sloane's work follows the classic pattern of sophisticated intellectual appropriation, taking concepts just emerging in the field, advancing them incrementally, then claiming breakthrough status." She tapped one particular paper. "The real innovation in her neural regeneration work appears to have come from this earlier research team at Johns Hopkins, where she did a brief postdoc. Can it be proven definitively?" "Scientific plagiarism is rarely black and white," Diana cautioned. "But there's enough here to warrant formal investigation, especially combined with the London incident documentation." She studied Melody thoughtfully. "May I ask why you're pursuing this? Professional integrity is admirable, but this feels personal." Melody hesitated, then decided on honesty. "Dr. Sloane is having an affair with my husband. She's convinced him that their intellectual compatibility justifies betraying our marriage." Understanding dawned in Diana's eyes. "Ah, and your husband values academic credentials." "Above almost everything," Melody confirmed, her hand resting protectively on her belly. "Then perhaps he should know about yours." Melody blinked in confusion. "I don't have academic credentials." "Don't you?" Diana smiled gently. "Melody, you've authenticated rare manuscripts for major university collections for years. Your analysis of the Emerson-Fuller correspondence revolutionized our understanding of transcendentalist thought. The paper you co-wrote with me on identifying authentic Dickinson handwriting is required reading in archival studies programs. That's just practical experience, not formal education. And yet Harvard awarded you a research fellowship 3 years ago. A technical designation so I could access restricted archives for the Thoreau project," Melody dismissed. "A designation that carries academic recognition regardless of how casually you treat it." Diana leaned forward. "Have you never told your husband about your scholarly contributions?" "He never asked," Melody realized aloud. "He saw the bookstore as a quaint business, not intellectual work. And I never corrected him because—" She paused, recognition dawning. "Because I didn't need his validation to know my own worth." The irony wasn't lost on her. While Thaddeus chased validation through association with Valerie's credentials, Melody had been quietly earning academic respect without seeking recognition. When Melody returned home that evening, she found Thaddeus in his office reviewing presentation slides. "The Harvard Neuroscience Center inauguration will be January 15th, he announced without preamble. Valerie's keynote will showcase the neural regeneration research that will integrate with our interface technology. Sounds prestigious, Melody replied neutrally. Will there be many guests? The academic elite of Boston, plus research directors from major hospitals nationwide. His tone carried unmistakable pride. It's invitation only, very exclusive. Will I be attending? The question hung in the air between them. Thaddeus looked uncomfortable. I thought, given your condition and the technical nature of the presentations, you might prefer to skip this one. It will be quite long, with receptions before and after. Probably exhausting for you. The transparent excuse should have hurt, but instead, Melody felt a curious detachment. You mean it would be awkward to have your pregnant wife and your girlfriend at the same academic showcase? Melody, we agreed to table that discussion until after the baby arrives. His tone carried the impatient edge it always did when she failed to accommodate his preferences. No, you decided that unilaterally, she corrected. Just like you've decided I shouldn't attend this event. It's not appropriate. Because I lack credentials? Because I'd embarrass you among your intellectual peers? Because it's a scientific event where you would be bored and uncomfortable, he snapped. Why make this difficult? You've never shown interest in academic functions before. Perhaps I'm evolving. She turned to leave, then paused. By the way, I've been meaning to ask, have you done due diligence on Valerie's research? Verified her methodologies independently? Thaddeus frowned. What are you talking about? Her work has been peer-reviewed and published in leading journals. So was Andrew Wakefield's vaccine research before it was discovered to be fraudulent, Melody observed mildly. Just a thought. She left him staring after her, confusion evident on his face. That night, alone in what had once been their shared bedroom, Melody made her decision. The Harvard event would provide the perfect setting to reveal what she had discovered, not just about Valerie's academic misconduct, but about her own unacknowledged expertise and worth. She opened her laptop and composed 2 emails. The first went to Martin Halloway, requesting specific documentation from his contacts at Johns Hopkins. The second went to Diana Winters, asking for her assistance in presenting their findings to Harvard's Research Ethics Committee. As Melody placed her hand on her belly, feeling her daughter's movements, a sense of calm resolution settled over her. For too long she had allowed Thaddeus to define her value through his narrow academic lens. On January 15th, that would change. She would attend the Harvard event, not as Thaddeus Harmon's convenient, uneducated wife, but as Melody Wilcox, respected scholar and authentication expert. And in doing so, she would reclaim not just her dignity, but her future. The first week of January brought a heavy snowfall that blanketed Cambridge in pristine white, muffling sounds and transforming Harvard Yard into a scene from a Victorian postcard. Melody sat in her bookstore's private reading room with Professor Diana Winters and Dr. Harold Chen, the latter examining documents spread across an antique library table. These comparisons are damning, Dr. Chen muttered, moving between Valerie's published methodology and the earlier research from his own department. Not illegal, perhaps, but ethically questionable. She built directly on Way's unpublished protocols without attribution. And there's a pattern, Diana added, sliding forward another comparison. The Johns Hopkins work from 2019, the research from your lab in 2022, and the London breakthrough in 2023. Incremental advancements repackaged as revolutionary insights. Melody watched their expressions as they connected the dots she'd painstakingly assembled. Is it enough to warrant investigation? Absolutely, Dr. Chen confirmed, his normally genial face hardened with professional indignation. Especially combined with the London documentation, the Harvard Ethics Committee would have serious questions. Would this affect the Neurological Center inauguration? Melody asked, carefully keeping her tone neutral. Diana and Dr. Chen exchanged glances. Harvard wouldn't want a research integrity scandal associated with their crown jewel facility launch, Diana said. They might postpone Valerie's keynote pending investigation, which could impact Quantum Nexus's partnership announcement, Dr. Chen added thoughtfully. Your husband's company is heavily invested in joint development with Valerie's team. Melody absorbed this, weighing potential consequences. I don't want to destroy my husband's company, she said finally. Just ensure he's not partnering with someone whose research might collapse under scrutiny. A difficult line to walk, Diana observed. Later that afternoon, as snow continued to fall outside the shop windows, Melody found herself contemplating how she'd arrived at this juncture. The path that had led her away from traditional academia had begun with her father's illness during her sophomore year at Wellesley. Professor James Wilcox, a respected literary scholar, had been diagnosed with aggressive pancreatic cancer shortly after her 19th birthday. Without siblings or other family to help, Melody had taken a leave of absence to care for him. What was intended as one semester became 2 years of managing his medications, appointments, and eventually hospice care. During those long months, as her classmates continued their academic progression, Melody's education took a different form. She catalogued her father's extensive library, corresponded with his colleagues, and transcribed his final academic papers as his strength failed. By his bedside, she absorbed advanced literary theory through their discussions of manuscripts she read aloud to him. After his death, returning to undergraduate classes felt like a step backward. She'd already been operating at a graduate level through her work with her father's research. Instead of resuming formal education, she used her inheritance to purchase a struggling bookstore near Harvard Square, transforming it into Cambridge literary treasures. What began as a specialty bookshop soon evolved as Melody's eye for authentic manuscripts attracted attention from collectors and academic institutions. By 25, she was authenticating rare documents for university archives. By 30, she had co-authored scholarly papers with established professors, though always as a secondary contributor without formal credentials to list. The irony wasn't lost on her. She'd accomplished what many PhDs aspired to without the degrees they cherished. Yet in Thaddeus's estimation, the absence of those credentials rendered her achievements invisible. Ms. Wilcox, her assistant called from the doorway, interrupting her reflection. "Professor Winters asked me to give you this before she left." Melody accepted the envelope, finding inside an official Harvard invitation to the Neurological Center inauguration, addressed to Melody Wilcox, literary authentication specialist. Diana pulled some strings, she murmured to herself, a smile forming. The invitation wasn't as Thaddeus Harmon's wife, but as a professional in her own right. That evening, Melody returned home to find delivery boxes stacked in the foyer. New furniture for Thaddeus's home office, according to the labels. He had mentioned nothing about this renovation. "Thaddeus!" she called, moving through the house. She found him in his study with an interior designer, reviewing plans that showed his office expanded to incorporate the adjacent guest room, the space they had discussed converting into a reading nook for the baby as she grew. "Melody," he greeted her, seeming momentarily discomforted. "I didn't expect you back so early." Clearly, she nodded toward the plans. "Home improvements?" "Just updating my workspace. With the neural interface project expanding, I'll need a proper meeting area." The designer, sensing tension, gathered her materials. "I'll email the revised proposals tomorrow, Mr. Harmon." After she departed, Melody gestured to the plans still visible on the desk. "The baby's reading alcove is now your conference area. We can create a reading space elsewhere," Thaddeus dismissed. "This makes more sense logistically. The neural interface partnership is moving forward rapidly." "With Valerie's team?" "Yes, with Dr. Sloan's research group." He emphasized the title pointedly. "The Harvard event will formalize our collaboration. It's potentially transformative for Quantum Nexus." "And your personal life," Melody added quietly. Thaddeus's expression hardened. "I thought we agreed to table that discussion." "No, you decided unilaterally to postpone any real conversation about your affair until after I've delivered your child." Melody's calm voice belied her simmering anger. "Just like you've decided to repurpose our daughter's future space without consultation. This is business, Melody. The company's future is conveniently aligned with your personal desires." She cut him off, something she rarely did. "Be honest, Thaddeus. These office renovations aren't just about work. You're preparing for a different future, one that accommodates Valerie's presence here." His silence confirmed her suspicion. "Have you secured an apartment yet?" she asked. "For after the baby comes, when you'll explain you need to give me space while coincidentally spending more time with Valerie." "It's not that calculated," he protested, though his eyes slid away from hers. "It is exactly that calculated. I just never thought you'd be so obvious." She turned to leave, then paused. "By the way, I'll be attending the Harvard event." Surprise flickered across his face. "How? It's invitation only." She retrieved Diana's envelope from her bag, placing the invitation on his desk. "I received my own invitation, not as your wife, but as a literary authentication specialist. Confusion replaced surprise. Oh, what? Why would they invite you for that? The genuine bewilderment in his voice might have hurt months ago. Now it merely confirmed how little he'd bothered to understand her professional life. Perhaps you should ask your Harvard colleagues who's been authenticating their rare manuscript acquisitions for the past decade. She left him staring at the invitation, his expression uncomprehending. The following days brought increasingly obvious signs of Thaddeus's detachment from their marriage. Late nights became overnight absences explained away as work emergencies. His clothes gradually migrated to the guest room. References to "after the baby comes" carried thinly veiled implications about separate living arrangements. Throughout this painful disintegration, Melody focused on her plan. Working with Diana and Dr. Chen, she compiled irrefutable evidence of Valerie's research improprieties. Simultaneously, she prepared a presentation of her own scholarly contributions, the Dickinson authentication that had revised literary understanding of the poet's late works, the Thoreau correspondence that had revealed new environmental insights, the Emerson Fuller analysis that had enhanced comprehension of transcendentalist philosophy. 8 days before the Harvard event, Melody experienced a momentary crisis of confidence while reviewing her documentation. Was she becoming exactly what she despised? Someone seeking validation through academic recognition? Was exposing Valerie merely personal revenge rather than professional integrity? She called Diana, voicing these doubts during a late-night conversation. "There's a crucial difference," Diana replied firmly. "You're not seeking validation through credentials. You're demanding recognition for work already done and expertise already proven. And regarding Valerie, this isn't about her relationship with your husband, but about research integrity. The academic community deserves to know if her breakthrough claims are suspect." "And Thaddeus?" Melody asked quietly. "This could damage his company significantly." "Perhaps," Diana acknowledged. "But wouldn't he prefer to know now before further entangling his technology with potentially compromised research? Either way, that's his problem to solve, not yours." The distinction helped clarify Melody's purpose. This wasn't about punishing Thaddeus or Valerie for their betrayal, but about standing in her own truth, both personally and professionally. As the Harvard event approached, Melody's preparations intensified, while her advancing pregnancy created new physical challenges. At 8 months, her energy flagged earlier each day, and Braxton Hicks' contractions occasionally interrupted her work. Dr. Frost had cautioned about stress levels, but completing this project before her daughter's arrival felt imperative. 3 days before the event, an unexpected complication arose. Margaret called Melody at home, her voice tense. "There's someone here asking about your research into Dr. Sloan," she reported. "A man claiming to be from Massachusetts General's legal department." Melody froze. Did he state his purpose? Something about preemptive review of potentially defamatory materials. "He has business cards, but wouldn't leave one." "I'll be there in 20 minutes, Melody decided. "Don't show him anything or confirm any details." The confrontation at the bookstore was brief but revelatory. The man wasn't from hospital legal as claimed, but a private investigator hired to determine what information Melody might have gathered about Valerie. Dr. Sloan became concerned when questions about her research methodologies started circulating. He explained uncomfortably after Melody threatened to call campus police. "She merely wants to address any misunderstandings before they cause reputational damage." "Interesting timing," Melody observed, "just before a major presentation that could secure her future funding." After the investigator departed, Melody called Dr. Chen, who was equally alarmed. "She knows we're onto her," he concluded, "which means someone in my department or at Harvard leaked information about our inquiries." "Will this affect your willingness to present our findings?" Melody asked. "Quite the opposite," Dr. Chen replied firmly. "Attempting to intimidate critics only confirms there's something to hide. But you should be careful, Melody. Valerie has powerful connections and significant resources." That evening, Melody discovered just how significant those resources might be when Thaddeus confronted her in their kitchen. "What exactly are you planning for the Harvard event?" he demanded without preamble. "I'm attending as an invited guest," she replied calmly, continuing to prepare her tea. "You know that's not what I'm asking." His voice carried an edge she rarely heard directed at her. "Valerie mentioned concerns about some sort of investigation into her research. She said your name came up." So Valerie had sent her investigator, then immediately alerted Thaddeus. The coordination was telling. "I've been consulting on research ethics with colleagues at Harvard," Melody confirmed. "Dr. Sloane's work emerged as a topic of interest." "This is professional sabotage," Thaddeus said, his expression hardening. "You're trying to undermine Valerie because of personal jealousy." The accusation stung despite its predictability. "Is that what she told you? That I'm manufacturing ethical concerns out of spite?" "She mentioned you've been contacting her former colleagues, asking leading questions about her research protocols." "Conducting due diligence," Melody corrected. "Something you should have done before staking your company's future on her work. Her research has been peer-reviewed and validated by top journals. So was Andrew Wakefield's vaccine study, before it was revealed as fraudulent," Melody countered. "Academic misconduct doesn't always appear obvious at first glance." Thaddeus ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "This is absurd. Valerie is a renowned neurosurgeon with credentials from the world's top institutions." "Credentials aren't the same as integrity," Melody said quietly. "Something I'd hoped you understood." His expression shuttered. "I'm asking you to reconsider whatever you're planning, not just for my sake or Valerie's, but for your own. You'll damage your reputation engaging in this kind of vindictive behavior." "My reputation," Melody repeated slowly. "Among people who've never bothered to learn what I actually do. How devastating." The sarcasm wasn't lost on him. "This isn't a game, Melody. There could be legal consequences." "Only if the allegations are false," she responded. "Truth is an absolute defense against defamation claims. Perhaps Dr. Sloane should consider that." Thaddeus stared at her, seeming to truly see her for the first time in months. "I don't recognize you anymore." "No," Melody agreed softly. "You never really saw me to begin with." The morning of the Harvard Neurological Center inauguration dawned clear and cold. Melody stood before her closet, considering her options before selecting a deep burgundy maternity dress that projected both professionalism and confidence. As she fastened her mother's pearls around her neck, her daughter kicked vigorously. "I know," she murmured, placing a hand on her belly. "Big day for both of us." The Harvard Science Center would be filled with the academic elite of Boston and beyond, researchers, hospital administrators, university officials, and potential donors. Among them would be Thaddeus and Valerie, presenting their groundbreaking partnership built on potentially fraudulent research. And there would be Melody, no longer defined by her relationship to Thaddeus Harmon, but standing in her own expertise and integrity. As her car approached the brick and glass edifice of the Science Center, Melody reviewed her documentation one final time. Diana and Dr. Chen would meet her inside, where they would first approach the ethics committee chair before the main presentation began. She felt a curious calm as she stepped from the car, facing the imposing academic temple she'd visited countless times as a researcher, but never as a recognized expert in her own right. Snowflakes drifted lazily around her as she climbed the steps, invitation in hand. Whatever happened in the next few hours would irrevocably change her future, and Thaddeus's. Yet for the first time since discovering his betrayal, Melody felt not like a victim, but like a woman reclaiming her narrative, stepping fully into her own power. With that thought firmly in mind, she pulled open the heavy glass door and entered. The Harvard Science Center auditorium hummed with the particular energy generated when intellectual power converges with financial influence. Distinguished professors in academic regalia mingled with hospital administrators and tech entrepreneurs, while university photographers circulated, documenting the historic occasion for alumni magazines and donor reports. Melody entered the reception area, immediately aware of curious glances directed her way. Her advanced pregnancy made her conspicuous enough, but her solo arrival, without Thaddeus as expected, generated additional interest. She spotted Diana Winters near a display of neural imaging advancements and made her way toward her ally. "You look formidable," Diana greeted her with an approving nod. "Ready?" "As I'll ever be," Melody replied, accepting a program from a student volunteer. The glossy brochure featured Valerie's portrait prominently, alongside a schedule listing her keynote, Revolutionary Approaches to Neural Regeneration, Breaking Boundaries in Neurological Recovery. "Dr. Chen is speaking with the ethics committee chair now," Diana murmured. "They're reviewing our documentation in a side office." Melody scanned the room, eventually locating Thaddeus near the stage. He stood with several board members from Quantum Nexus, his tall frame easy to distinguish in a bespoke suit that probably cost more than most graduate students' semester budget. Beside him, Valerie was resplendent in a tailored navy dress, her hand occasionally touching his arm as she spoke with animation to an elderly man Melody recognized as a major hospital donor. As if sensing her gaze, Thaddeus looked up. His expression shifted from professional charm to shock when he spotted Melody. He said something quickly to Valerie, who turned to follow his gaze, her own features momentarily hardening before composing into a neutral mask. Thaddeus crossed the room with measured steps, positioning himself to block Valerie from Melody's view. "You came," he stated, eyes assessing her attire and the folder she carried. "As I said I would," Melody replied calmly. "My invitation was quite specific." "Melody, if you're planning some kind of disruption—" "I'm planning to participate in an academic event as an invited professional," she interrupted. "Nothing more, nothing less." Before he could respond, Harvard's president Eliza Montgomery approached the podium, tapping the microphone to signal the formal proceedings would begin. "If you'll excuse me," Melody said, "I should find my seat." The audience settled as President Montgomery welcomed them to a pivotal moment in Harvard's continued leadership in neuroscience research. Melody took a seat beside Diana in the third row, noticing Thaddeus watching her intently from his position nearer the stage. "Before we proceed with our main program and the official ribbon cutting for the Eleanor Hammond Center for Neurological Innovation," President Montgomery continued, "we have a special announcement regarding a significant contribution to Harvard's academic resources." She gestured toward the side of the stage, where Dr. Philip Armitage, Dean of Arts and Humanities, approached with a leather portfolio. "Many of you know Harvard's Houghton Library houses one of the world's premier collections of American literary manuscripts," President Montgomery explained. "Today, we're honored to announce an extraordinary addition to that collection, a previously unknown cache of Emily Dickinson correspondence that fundamentally alters our understanding of the poet's later creative period." Murmurs rippled through the audience. Thaddeus looked confused by this apparent deviation from the planned program. This remarkable discovery would not have been possible without the expertise of Melody Wilcox, whose authentication work has been invaluable to major research institutions across the country. Melody felt every eye in the room turn toward her as a spotlight suddenly illuminated her position. President Montgomery continued, "Ms. Wilcox not only authenticated these manuscripts, but provided crucial contextual analysis that places them within Dickinson's broader body of work. The Houghton Library publication detailing these findings has already been hailed as revolutionary by the American Literary Association." Thaddeus's expression transformed from confusion to disbelief as President Montgomery gestured for Melody to stand for recognition. The applause that followed was genuine, particularly from the humanities faculty present, many of whom had worked with Melody over the years. In recognition of Ms. Wilcox's contributions to literary scholarship without the benefit of traditional academic appointment, Harvard's Board of Regents has voted to award her an honorary degree at next month's special convocation. Thaddeus appeared thunderstruck, his gaze darting between Melody and Valerie, who looked equally blindsided by this unexpected development. Additionally, President Montgomery added, "Ms. Wilcox has agreed to serve as a consulting scholar for our new interdisciplinary initiative bridging literary archives and digital humanities, a perfect example of Harvard's commitment to recognizing expertise regardless of conventional credentials." The irony of that particular phrasing was not lost on Melody, who maintained composed dignity as she acknowledged the recognition with a modest nod. As she retook her seat, she caught Evelyn Prescott Harmon's eye across the aisle. Her mother-in-law offered the slightest approving smile. The program proceeded with the formal dedication of the Neurological Center. Various dignitaries spoke about the promise of collaborative research between medicine and technology. Throughout these presentations, Melody observed Thaddeus repeatedly checking his phone, his expression growing increasingly concerned. Finally, President Montgomery returned to the podium. "And now, the moment we've been anticipating, Dr. Valerie Sloan will present her groundbreaking research on neural regeneration, which will be a cornerstone of the Hammond Center's initial work." Valerie ascended the stage with practiced confidence, her slideshow beginning with a dramatic image of a damaged neural pathway regenerating through her innovative protocol. "Thank you, President Montgomery, distinguished colleagues, and generous supporters," she began. "Today marks not just the opening of a remarkable facility, but the beginning of a new era in neurological treatment. My team's research has demonstrated unprecedented success in stimulating neural regrowth using a novel combination of pharmaceutical and electrical stimulation protocols." As Valerie continued outlining her methodology, Melody noticed a disturbance at the back of the auditorium. Dr. Chen had entered with Professor Lawrence Edmonds, chair of the Research Ethics Committee, both looking grave as they conferred with University Counsel near the exit. Valerie was mid-explanation when President Montgomery received a note from an aide, her expression shifting subtly as she read it. She rose and approached the side of the stage, gesturing discreetly for the university provost to join her. "This innovative approach," Valerie continued, seemingly unaware of the developing situation, "represents a paradigm shift in how we conceptualize neural recovery after traumatic injury." Thaddeus had noticed the commotion now too, his attention divided between Valerie's presentation and the growing cluster of administrative officials huddled in urgent consultation. President Montgomery returned to her seat, her face now carefully neutral. She allowed Valerie to complete her overview before stepping to the podium during the transition to the Q&A portion. "Thank you, Dr. Sloan, for that illuminating presentation," she said smoothly. "Before we proceed to questions, I must address a matter that has just been brought to my attention by our Research Ethics Committee." The room went completely still. Valerie froze beside the podium, her expression flickering between confusion and alarm. "It appears that questions have been raised regarding certain aspects of the methodology presented today," President Montgomery continued, her measured tone belying the bombshell she was delivering. "Specifically, concerns about proper attribution of research protocols developed at Johns Hopkins and Massachusetts General Hospital prior to Dr. Sloan's involvement." Gasps and whispers erupted throughout the audience. Valerie grasped the podium, knuckles whitening. "Additionally, documentation has been presented regarding a previously undisclosed investigation at London's Royal Neurological Institute concerning similar attribution issues." Thaddeus stood abruptly, his face ashen, as he stared first at Valerie, then at Melody, comprehension dawning. "In accordance with Harvard's commitment to research integrity," President Montgomery stated firmly, "we will be postponing further presentation of these findings pending a full review by the Ethics Committee. Dr. Edmonds will oversee this process beginning immediately." Valerie stepped forward, her composure cracking. "This is absurd. My work has been peer-reviewed and published in leading journals. These accusations are clearly orchestrated by—" "Dr. Sloan," President Montgomery cut her off with steel in her voice, "this is neither the time nor place to address these concerns. The committee will provide a full opportunity for you to respond to the documentation presented." The remainder of the event proceeded in awkward fragments. The ribbon-cutting ceremony performed with forced enthusiasm, the reception afterward marked by clusters of attendees exchanging shocked whispers. Thaddeus moved through the crowd like a man sleepwalking, his professional triumph transformed into potential catastrophe in minutes. Melody stood conversing quietly with Diana and Dr. Chen when Thaddeus finally approached, his expression a complex mixture of anger, confusion, and reluctant admiration. "May I speak with you?" he asked Melody stiffly. "Privately." They found an empty faculty office off the main reception area. Thaddeus closed the door and turned to face her, his composure fragile. "You did this," he stated, not a question, but an accusation. "I presented factual evidence about research misconduct," Melody corrected. "The Ethics Committee determined it was credible enough to warrant investigation. You deliberately timed this to humiliate Valerie publicly, to sabotage our partnership." "No, Thaddeus. I timed it to prevent your company from building its future on fraudulent research." Melody maintained her calm. "The presentation timing was Valerie's choice, not mine." He paced the small office, running a hand through his hair. "Do you have any idea what this means for Quantum Nexus? For the clinical trials we've planned, for the Tokyo investors?" "I imagine it means you'll need to find more reliable research partners," she replied evenly. "Ones whose work can withstand ethical scrutiny." He stopped pacing, studying her with new eyes. "That honorary degree, the Dickinson discovery, how long have you been doing that level of scholarly work?" "Since before we met," Melody said simply. "I've authenticated manuscripts for Harvard's collections for over a decade, co-authored papers with Diana Winters and other scholars, lectured at conferences on literary authentication methodologies. But you never asked, Thaddeus. The truth hung between them. You saw my bookstore as a quaint hobby, not serious intellectual work. You assumed without formal credentials, my contributions couldn't be significant. That's not fair. I've always supported your store. Supported, yes. Respected as equal to your own work? Never. Melody touched her pearls absently. Remember the Wilkins dinner party last year? When Professor Sanderson asked about my background, you interrupted to say I was more practical than academic before I could answer. You've been dismissing my intellectual contributions since we met. Thaddeus had the grace to look discomforted. I never meant to diminish your work. Yet you did, consistently. And when Valerie appeared with her impressive credentials and institutional affiliations, you were immediately drawn to the validation they represented. Melody's voice remained level, though her hands trembled slightly. You didn't fall in love with her, Thaddeus. You fell in love with what she symbolized: academic prestige, peer recognition, the external validation you've craved since you arrived at Harvard as a scholarship student from the Midwest. His head snapped up. How did you know about that? Your mother told me about your background, about how you've always felt you needed to prove yourself worthy of inclusion in these elite circles. Melody gestured toward the reception continuing outside. The irony is, you chose Valerie's fraudulent credentials over my authentic accomplishments. Thaddeus leaned against the desk, suddenly looking exhausted. The university is taking these allegations seriously, because they're substantiated. Dr. Chen confirmed that key elements of Valerie's methodology were developed in his lab before she arrived from London. The Johns Hopkins documentation shows similar appropriation patterns. Melody opened her folder, placing several comparison pages on the desk. This isn't personal vendetta, Thaddeus. It's academic integrity. He studied the documents, his scientific training allowing him to recognize the damning similarities between earlier work and Valerie's claimed innovations. If this is verified, he began. The partnership collapses, Melody finished. Yes, but better now than after you've invested millions in clinical trials based on questionable research. You could have told me privately, given me time to distance Quantum Nexus before this went public. Would you have believed me? She asked quietly. Or dismissed it as pregnancy hormones and jealousy? His silence was answer enough. I tried to warn you, she reminded him. I asked if you'd done due diligence on her research. You dismissed the concern because you couldn't imagine your brilliant Valerie being anything less than authentic. Through the office window, they could see Valerie engaged in intense conversation with university officials, her body language increasingly defensive. Her career at Harvard is likely over, Thaddeus said, watching the scene, and possibly her medical practice as well, if this leads to broader investigation. Actions have consequences, Melody replied without sympathy. She built her reputation by appropriating others' work while dismissing those she deemed intellectually inferior. The irony is rather perfect. A knock at the door interrupted them. Diana Winters entered, nodding apologetically to Thaddeus before addressing Melody. The Ethics Committee wants your full statement now, while the documentation is being reviewed. Are you up for it, or should we reschedule given your condition? I'll come now, Melody decided, gathering her materials. She turned back to Thaddeus. I need to do this. We can continue our conversation later. He nodded numbly, still processing the dramatic reversal of the day's expected outcomes. As Melody reached the door, he called after her, The honorary degree. Congratulations. It's well deserved. She paused, considering his words. The validation isn't in the degree, Thaddeus, it's in the work itself. That's something I understood long before today. As she departed with Diana, Melody felt Thaddeus watching her, truly seeing her, perhaps for the first time since they'd met. His expression reflected the dawning recognition of his catastrophic error in judgment, not just regarding Valerie's research, but about the remarkable woman he had married and failed to truly know. Outside in the reception hall, Valerie was being escorted from the building by university security, her professional facade crumbling as her carefully constructed academic empire began to collapse. Simultaneous to her exit, Melody was being ushered into the Ethics Committee meeting, not as Thaddeus Harmon's pregnant wife, but as Melody Wilcox, respected scholar whose expertise had exposed a significant case of academic fraud. The symmetry was not lost on Thaddeus, who stood alone amidst the wreckage of his professional and personal plans, finally understanding the true meaning of credentials versus authentic accomplishment. The week following the Harvard event unleashed a storm of consequences that rippled through Boston's academic community with unprecedented force. Valerie's carefully constructed reputation collapsed under the weight of mounting evidence. The Boston Globe's headline, "Prestigious Researcher Faces Multiple Allegations of Intellectual Theft," was followed by increasingly detailed exposés in scientific journals and academic publications. Massachusetts General Hospital placed Valerie on administrative leave pending their own investigation, while Harvard's Ethics Committee worked overtime, reviewing the extensive documentation Melody, Diana, and Dr. Chen had compiled. 3 days after the failed presentation, Johns Hopkins University announced they were re-examining publications from Valerie's tenure there, focusing on attribution issues similar to those identified at Harvard. For Thaddeus, the professional fallout was immediate and severe. Tokyo investors withdrew their tentative funding commitment to Quantum Nexus, citing concerns about the integrity of the research foundation for the Neural Interface project. The company's stock dropped 17% in 2 days, as analysts questioned the viability of clinical trials without Valerie's supposedly groundbreaking methodology. Melody observed these developments from a careful distance, having returned to their Cambridge home only to find Thaddeus had moved most of his belongings to a downtown apartment. Their communication occurred primarily through brief text messages about practical matters, while lawyers began discreet discussions about protecting Melody's financial interests regardless of the marriage's future. 10 days after the Harvard event, Melody sat in her bookstore's private reading room with Diana, reviewing paperwork for her upcoming honorary degree ceremony. "The ethics investigation is proceeding rapidly," Diana informed her. "Multiple researchers have come forward with additional evidence of Valerie's creative approach to attribution." "And Thaddeus's company?" Melody asked, unable to completely suppress her concern despite everything. "Struggling, but salvageable from what I hear. They're pivoting to emphasize partnerships with other research teams, distancing themselves from Valerie's work." Diana studied her friend carefully. "Are you worried about him?" Melody sighed, absently stroking her belly. "Not about him specifically, but about our daughter's future, yes. Whatever happens between Thaddeus and me, she shouldn't suffer financially because of his poor judgment." "That's remarkably generous, considering the circumstances." The bell above the shop door chimed, followed by Margaret's voice calling, "Ms. Wilcox, there's someone here to see you." Melody expected another journalist seeking comment on the Valerie Sloan scandal. Instead, Thaddeus stood in the doorway looking noticeably different from his usual polished self. His hair needed trimming, and faint shadows beneath his eyes suggested sleepless nights. Diana excused herself tactfully, leaving them alone among the rare books. "You're looking well," Thaddeus offered awkwardly. "How are you feeling?" "As well as can be expected at 36 weeks pregnant while navigating a public scandal and marital collapse," Melody replied with unexpected frankness. "What brings you here, Thaddeus? More papers to sign?" He winced at her directness. "No, I wanted to talk about everything." He gestured to the reading chairs. "May I?" They settled into the leather armchairs that had hosted countless literary discussions over the years. For several moments neither spoke, the weight of unresolved pain and betrayal filling the space between them. "Valerie is leaving for a position in Switzerland next week," Thaddeus finally said. "A private research institution willing to overlook the current controversy." "Of course they are," Melody replied without surprise. "People with her connections rarely face lasting consequences, though I imagine her days of academic prestige are finished." "Completely." He met her eyes directly. "I've severed all ties with her personally and professionally. Quantum Nexus has withdrawn from any research associated with her methodologies." Melody nodded, acknowledging the information without revealing her thoughts. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," Thaddeus continued, his usual confidence absent. "About what attracted me to her. About what it says about me." He paused. "You were right at Harvard. I wasn't in love with Valerie herself, but with what she represented. Academic validation I've craved since I was the scholarship kid from Ohio trying to belong at Harvard. Self-awareness comes at quite a cost sometimes," Melody observed. "In my case, potentially everything that matters." His voice cracked slightly. "Melody, I know an apology is wholly inadequate for what I've done. The betrayal, the disrespect, the failure to see and value who you truly are. Yet you're here to offer one anyway, she concluded for him. I am. He leaned forward, hands clasped between his knees. I'm sorry. Profoundly, completely sorry. Not just for the affair, but for years of subtle dismissal of your intellect and accomplishments, for prioritizing credentials over character, for failing to really see you. The apology was more comprehensive than she'd expected, yet Melody felt curiously detached, as if watching this scene from a distance. What exactly are you hoping for, Thaddeus? She asked quietly. A chance, he replied immediately. Not forgiveness. I haven't earned that, but an opportunity to try, to be present for our daughter's birth, to demonstrate through actions rather than words that I understand the magnitude of my error. Melody considered this request, weighing her competing emotions, the lingering pain of betrayal against practical considerations for their child's future. I won't exclude you from the birth, she decided. Our daughter deserves to have both parents welcome her into the world, regardless of what happens between us afterward. Relief softened his features. Thank you. But I need absolute clarity, she continued firmly. This doesn't signify reconciliation or forgiveness. Those would require time and evidence of genuine change. I won't make decisions about our marriage while adjusting to motherhood. That's more than fair, he acknowledged. May I ask about your plans after the baby comes? Harvard has offered me a visiting scholar position for the fall semester, Melody revealed, teaching a graduate seminar on authentication methodologies while completing the Dickinson project documentation. They've arranged accommodations that would include childcare assistance. Surprise registered on Thaddeus's face. That's impressive. Congratulations. Thank you. She noted his genuine tone without commenting on it. The timing works well with the bookstore. Margaret is ready for more responsibility, and Diana's graduate assistant needs part-time work. As Thaddeus absorbed these details of a future Melody had constructed without him, he seemed to finally comprehend how completely he had underestimated her capabilities. You never needed my validation, he realized aloud. No, she agreed simply. I didn't. The conversation shifted to practical matters, her due date approaching, the pediatrician she'd selected, arrangements for the hospital. Throughout this exchange, Melody maintained the emotional boundary she'd established, treating Thaddeus as the father of her child rather than the husband who had betrayed her. When he left, promising to be available whenever she needed him, Melody felt an unexpected sense of closure. Not forgiveness, but perhaps the beginning of a new understanding that might eventually allow for cooperative parenting, if nothing else. 3 weeks later, in the pre-dawn hours of a February morning, Melody awoke to unmistakable contractions. She called her doula first, then Thaddeus as promised. He arrived at the hospital 30 minutes after she was admitted, his face a mixture of anxiety and wonder. "You're sure you want me here?" he asked from the doorway of her delivery room. "I'm sure," Melody confirmed, grimacing through another contraction. "She's your daughter too." The labor progressed rapidly, 8 intense hours during which Melody discovered reserves of strength she hadn't known she possessed. Thaddeus remained present, but appropriately peripheral, offering support without attempting to control the situation. At 2:17 that afternoon, Iris Evelyn Wilcox Harmon entered the world with a determined cry, her tiny hands clenched into resolute fists. "She's perfect," the doctor announced, placing the newborn on Melody's chest. Melody gazed down at her daughter's face, the delicate features, the shock of dark hair, and felt a surge of love so powerful it momentarily eclipsed everything else, including the complicated emotions surrounding the man standing beside her bed. "Would you like to hold her?" she asked Thaddeus after the initial bonding time. He nodded wordlessly, carefully accepting the swaddled infant from Melody's arms. As he cradled Iris, something transformed in his expression, a profound shift that seemed to rearrange his understanding of what truly mattered. "Hello, Iris," he whispered, voice thick with emotion. "I'm your father." The baby's eyes, still unfocused, seemed to search for the source of his voice. Thaddeus gently touched her tiny hand, and her fingers reflexively curled around his. "I promise you'll always know how valuable you are," he continued softly. "Not for achievements or credentials or others' approval, but simply for being yourself." Melody watched this interaction with complex emotions. The lingering hurt of betrayal mingled with recognition of the genuine transformation occurring before her eyes. For perhaps the first time, Thaddeus was experiencing love without conditions or expectations, the purest connection possible. In the days that followed, they established an uneasy coexistence centered entirely on Iris. Thaddeus visited daily, handling night feedings to give Melody rest, changing diapers without complaint, learning the intricate choreography of newborn care alongside her. 2 weeks after Iris's birth, as evening snow fell softly outside the nursery window, Thaddeus raised the subject they'd both been avoiding. "I've been looking at houses near campus," he said, as they completed the evening feeding routine. "Close enough to be present in Iris's daily life, but separate enough to respect your boundaries." Melody settled into the rocking chair, Iris sleeping peacefully against her shoulder. "You've accepted we won't reconcile." It wasn't a question, but Thaddeus nodded anyway. "I haven't given up hope entirely," he admitted, "but I recognize the damage I've caused may be irreparable, and I respect that you need to determine that for yourself, without pressure from me." His honesty was refreshing, a marked departure from the manipulative defenses he'd employed during their confrontations about Valerie. "What about Quantum Nexus?" Melody asked, changing the subject slightly. "Will the company survive?" "In a significantly altered form," he replied. "We've refocused on interface hardware rather than regenerative applications. Smaller potential market, but built on solid research." He hesitated. The Harvard incident was actually clarifying in an unexpected way. It forced me to examine what success really means, not just professionally but personally. "And what have you concluded?" "That I've been measuring the wrong things all along." He gestured toward their sleeping daughter. "She doesn't care about my Harvard degrees or corporate valuations, and the people who truly matter in my life, you, my mother, even my closest colleagues, value integrity and genuine connection over achievements." The insight seemed genuine rather than calculated, suggesting that perhaps the crisis had indeed catalyzed meaningful reflection. As winter transitioned to spring, Melody settled into motherhood while preparing for her upcoming Harvard position. The campus newspaper had published a feature on her Dickinson discovery, highlighting her unorthodox career path as an example of expertise developed outside traditional academic frameworks. Thaddeus, meanwhile, had purchased a brownstone 10 minutes from their Cambridge home, creating a second space where Iris would be comfortable as they established a co-parenting routine. He attended her honorary degree ceremony, sitting appropriately distanced from the family section, his pride evident despite their marital estrangement. On a bright April afternoon, as cherry blossoms drifted across Harvard Yard, Melody met Diana for coffee, pushing Iris's stroller through familiar pathways. "The Ethics Committee issued their final report this morning," Diana informed her. "Comprehensive validation of every concern we raised. Valerie's key papers have been retracted, and Harvard has formally severed all relationships with her." "A thorough professional reckoning," Melody noted, adjusting Iris's blanket against the spring breeze. "Though I hear her Swiss position remains secure." "For now," Diana agreed. "But in our world, reputation is currency. Hers is irreparably devalued." She studied Melody carefully. "And how are things with Thaddeus? He seems quite devoted to fatherhood from what I observe." "He is," Melody acknowledged. "He's present, responsible, and genuinely enchanted by Iris. As a father, I have no complaints. And as a husband," Melody sighed, considering how to articulate her complex feelings. The betrayal revealed fundamental truths about his character and values that can't be undone. "He's changing, perhaps genuinely, but that doesn't erase what happened." "You're not obligated to reconcile," Diana reminded her gently. "Forgiveness doesn't require restoration of the relationship." "I know." Melody smiled down at Iris, who blinked contentedly in the dappled sunlight. "That's what I've been working toward. Forgiveness for my own peace, without necessarily rebuilding what was broken." Later that evening, when Thaddeus arrived for his scheduled time with Iris, Melody noticed he carried a small wrapped package. "A gift for her?" she asked, gesturing toward the box. "Actually, it's for you." He handed it to her somewhat hesitantly. "I came across it while reorganizing my office." Melody unwrapped the package to find a rare first edition of Thoreau's essays, beautifully preserved in its original binding. "This was missing from the university collection," she said, carefully examining the volume. "How did you find it?" "At an estate sale in Concord last year. The family didn't recognize its significance." He watched her expert handling of the book. I bought it intending to give it to you for our anniversary, but then," he trailed off, the events that had intervened hanging unspoken between them. Melody appreciated both the gift and his restraint in not attempting to use it as leverage for reconciliation. "Thank you," she said simply. "The Houghton Library will be grateful for its return. I thought perhaps you might include it in your authentication seminar this fall." He nodded toward a stack of course preparation materials on her desk. "A practical example for your students." The thoughtfulness of this suggestion, recognizing her professional interests rather than their personal history, struck Melody as evidence of genuine change. As May arrived with its promise of renewal, Melody finalized her decision about their marriage. She invited Thaddeus to dinner at their Cambridge home after Iris was asleep, setting a neutral tone with simple food and a focused agenda. "You've been a dedicated father these past months," she began, after they settled at the dining table. "I want to acknowledge that." "She's extraordinary," Thaddeus replied. "Being her father is the greatest privilege of my life." "I've been considering our situation carefully," Melody continued, "weighing what's best for Iris, for each of us individually, and what's possible given our history." Thaddeus set down his fork, giving her his complete attention. The defensive arrogance that had once characterized him in serious conversations was notably absent. "I've decided to proceed with a legal separation," she stated clearly. "Not immediately pursuing divorce, but establishing formal parameters for our co-parenting arrangement and financial responsibilities." Though he'd clearly anticipated this possibility, the confirmation still registered as painful. "I understand," he said quietly, "and I respect your decision, though I won't pretend it's the outcome I'd hoped for." The separation agreement would include provisions for revisiting our status after 1 year, Melody explained, giving us both time to adjust to parenthood and determine whether there's any foundation for rebuilding trust. "That seems reasonable," he acknowledged. "May I ask what influenced this decision rather than moving directly to divorce?" Melody considered her answer carefully. "I've observed genuine effort on your part to change, not just superficial apologies, but meaningful reflection on your values and priorities. I don't know if that's enough to overcome the damage that's been done, but I believe it deserves time to demonstrate its authenticity. Thank you for that." His voice carried sincere gratitude rather than calculation. "Whatever happens between us, I'm committed to being the father Iris deserves and finding a way to honor what we once meant to each other." As they finished dinner, discussing practical matters like summer scheduling and preparations for Melody's fall teaching position, a different kind of relationship began taking shape. Not the intimate partnership they had once shared, but something potentially more honest. Two individuals committed to raising their daughter with integrity while acknowledging painful truths about their past. In late June, as afternoon sunlight streamed through the bookstore windows, Melody finalized syllabus details for her Harvard seminar, while Iris napped in her portable bassinet. The shop had become a comfortable hybrid space, part business, part personal sanctuary where she could work while keeping her daughter close. Margaret approached with a campus newspaper. "Thought you might want to see this," she said, pointing to a small article near the back. The headline read, "Quantum Nexus Establishes Ethics in Research Fellowship." The accompanying photo showed Thaddeus presenting a scholarship check to a doctoral student whose research focused on transparency and attribution in collaborative scientific projects. The article quoted Thaddeus, "The scientific community relies on integrity in research. This fellowship will support scholars committed to establishing best practices for ensuring proper credit and ethical protocols in interdisciplinary projects." Melody studied the image. Thaddeus looked simultaneously humbled and purpose-driven, no longer the man obsessed with credentials and validation she had married, but not quite a stranger either. The fellowship represented a public acknowledgement of lessons painfully learned, a concrete step toward making amends beyond personal apologies. She folded the newspaper thoughtfully as Iris began to stir. Lifting her daughter, Melody gazed into eyes that somehow combined her own determination with Thaddeus's intensity. "Your father is trying," she whispered to the infant, "and so am I." Whatever path their fractured family ultimately took, toward careful rebuilding or compassionate separation, Melody had discovered an unshakable truth through the painful unraveling of her marriage. Her value had never depended on Thaddeus's recognition or anyone's formal credentials. Like the rare books she had spent her career authenticating, true worth came from the substance within, not the labels applied from without. As she gathered Iris's things for their afternoon walk through Harvard Yard, Melody felt neither triumph nor bitterness about the dramatic events that had transformed her life. Instead, she experienced something more nuanced, the quiet confidence of a woman who had reclaimed her narrative and discovered her own power in the process. The marriage she had believed would last a lifetime had cracked under pressure, revealing fundamental flaws in its foundation. Whether those cracks could ever be repaired remained uncertain, but she had emerged from the wreckage not as a victim, but as the architect of her future, a scholar in her own right, a mother of limitless love, and a woman who finally, completely understood her own immeasurable worth. 6 months later, autumn painted Harvard Yard in brilliant golds and crimsons as students hurried across campus, clutching coffee cups against the October chill. Inside Emerson Hall, Melody Wilcox stood before a seminar room of graduate students, a first-edition Emily Dickinson manuscript carefully displayed under the document camera. "Notice the distinctive pressure patterns in the letter formation," she explained, using a laser pointer to highlight specific details. Dickinson's authentic writing reveals a rightward slant of approximately 12 degrees, with particular emphasis on descenders. These subtle markers became invaluable when authenticating the previously unknown collection we discussed last week. The students, a mix of literature scholars and archival science specialists, leaned forward, absorbed in the technical analysis. In the corner of the room, 9-month-old Iris babbled quietly in a custom-designed play area, occasionally shaking a soft rattle while Margaret kept watchful eyes on her. "For Tuesday, please review the spectroscopic analysis protocols in Chapter 7, focusing particularly on ink composition identification for 19th century American manuscripts." Melody concluded the session as students gathered their materials. "And remember, your authentication project proposals are due next Friday." As the room cleared, Diana Winters entered, smiling at the domestic academic hybrid Melody had created. "Your authentication seminar has the highest enrollment in the department," she noted, bending to greet Iris with a gentle tickle. "And the youngest auditor." Melody gathered her teaching materials while Margaret prepared Iris for their walk home. "The department has been remarkably accommodating about my bringing her to classes." "Self-interest," Diana replied with a knowing smile. "They're desperate to keep you on permanently." The dean mentioned a potential endowed position in literary authentication studies next year. This news, which would have seemed impossible a year ago, no longer surprised Melody. Her honorary degree had evolved into a visiting lecturer position, which had quickly expanded as her Dickinson authentication work gained international recognition. The academic world that had once seemed closed to her without formal credentials now embraced her expertise with enthusiasm. "I'll consider it," Melody said, helping Margaret secure Iris in her stroller, "though I still want to maintain involvement with the bookstore." "Speaking of which," Diana said, handing her an envelope, "the American Antiquarian Society confirmed they want you to authenticate their newly acquired Hawthorne collection. Apparently your work on the Dickinson manuscripts has made you the authentication expert of choice." Melody accepted the envelope with quiet satisfaction. Her professional identity had fully emerged from the shadow of being Thaddeus Harmon's wife into recognition as a scholar in her own right. Outside, they paused on the steps of Emerson Hall as students streamed past. Across the yard, Melody spotted a familiar figure walking with purpose toward the Science Center. Thaddeus likely headed to a meeting about the ethics in research fellowship his company had established. In the 6 months since their legal separation, he had maintained his commitment to co-parenting with remarkable consistency. 3 afternoons each week and alternate weekends, he cared for Iris at his brownstone, which featured a nursery designed with thoughtful attention to detail. More surprisingly, he had begun attending ethics seminars at the Kennedy School, examining how technology corporations could incorporate stronger research integrity protocols. "There's Thaddeus," Diana observed, following Melody's gaze. "He's speaking to my department tomorrow about transparency in research partnerships. Quite the transformation from the corporate ruthlessness he was known for." Melody nodded, acknowledging the genuine nature of his changes without commenting further. Their relationship had evolved into a careful cordiality centered entirely around Iris's well-being. The pain of betrayal had gradually mellowed into something more complex, not forgiveness exactly, but a recognition that people could indeed change when confronted with the consequences of their actions. That evening, as Melody prepared for Thaddeus's scheduled time with Iris, her doorbell rang precisely at 6. His punctuality had become one of many small evidences of respect for her boundaries and schedule. "How was your day?" he asked, entering with the careful familiarity of someone conscious of no longer belonging in this space. "Productive. My authentication seminar is going well." She handed him Iris's overnight bag. "I've packed her favorite books and the new sleeper." Thaddeus accepted the bag, then gently lifted Iris from her playmat. "Hello, sunshine," he greeted her, rewarded with a toothy grin and excited kicks. "Ready for our adventure?" "She should sleep through the night now," Melody explained, "but the teething gel is in the side pocket if she gets uncomfortable." Their exchange of parenting information flowed easily, a practical routine they had perfected. As Thaddeus prepared to leave, he hesitated. "Mother asked if you'd join us for dinner tomorrow night," he said. "She wants to discuss Iris's trust fund details, and she mentioned having some rare book acquisition information you might find interesting." Evelyn Prescott Harmon's transformation had been perhaps the most surprising development of the past year. Her relationship with Melody had evolved from cool tolerance to genuine respect, particularly after witnessing her former daughter-in-law's academic recognition. The formidable Harvard regent now regularly shared information about literary collections with Melody and doted shamelessly on Iris. "I'll be there," Melody agreed. 7 o'clock? After they departed, Melody moved through her quiet home, still the Cambridge Victorian she had shared with Thaddeus, though significantly rearranged to reflect her independent life. His office had become her authentication workspace, featuring specialized lighting and imaging equipment for manuscript analysis. The formal dining room now accommodated both academic research and intimate dinner gatherings with her expanding circle of colleagues. The next evening at Evelyn's Beacon Hill townhouse, Melody arrived to find Thaddeus already there, playing on the floor with Iris while his mother looked on with uncharacteristic softness. "Melody," Evelyn greeted her with a warm embrace that would have been unimaginable a year earlier. "Perfect timing. I've just opened a rather exceptional Bordeaux." As they settled in the living room, Iris contentedly stacking blocks between them, Evelyn raised an unexpected topic. "I've been approached about writing my memoirs," she announced. "Harvard University Press is particularly interested in my perspective on women in academic leadership over 5 decades. "That's wonderful," Melody responded. "Your experiences would provide invaluable historical context." "Indeed," Evelyn agreed, "but I find myself in need of a literary collaborator with exceptional attention to authenticating personal accounts against historical records." Her gaze fixed meaningfully on Melody. "Someone who understands both academic rigor and narrative structure." The implication was clear, a professional opportunity that acknowledged Melody's unique expertise while offering a chance to document an important female perspective in academic history. "I'd be honored to discuss the possibility," Melody replied, genuinely intrigued by the project. Throughout dinner, she observed the subtle dynamics between mother and son, Evelyn's pointed questions about Thaddeus's ethics initiative, his thoughtful responses lacking the defensive edge that once characterized him. Their relationship too appeared to have evolved towards something more authentic. Later, as Thaddeus walked Melody to her car, a light snow began falling, the first of the season. "Mother's memoir project sounds perfect for you," he commented, holding an umbrella over her. "It's an interesting opportunity," Melody agreed, "though balancing it with teaching and the bookstore would be challenging." "You've always excelled at balancing multiple worlds," he observed quietly. "I just failed to appreciate that skill until it was too late." The simple acknowledgement, offered without expectation or agenda, touched something in Melody. "You're doing good work with the ethics initiative," she said. "Iris will be proud of that legacy." His expression softened at the mention of their daughter. "The separation agreement review is next month," he noted carefully. "I've been thinking about what happens next." "So have I," Melody admitted. "Whatever you decide, I'll respect it," Thaddeus said. "You've given me more consideration than I deserved by not proceeding directly to divorce." The snow fell more heavily now, creating a quiet cocoon around them in the darkness. "People can change," Melody said finally. "I've seen evidence of that, but some damages can't be undone, only acknowledged and accommodated." He nodded, understanding the measured boundary in her words. "All I ask is that we keep finding our way forward as Iris's parents, whatever else we may or may not become to each other. That much I can promise," she replied. The following afternoon, as sunlight streamed through the tall windows of her Harvard classroom, Melody concluded her lecture on forgery detection in American literary manuscripts. As students filed out, she moved to the back of the room where Iris was waking from her nap, reaching up with tiny hands. Lifting her daughter, Melody felt the perfection of this moment. Her professional expertise acknowledged, her personal strength reclaimed, her future open with possibilities she defined for herself. "Dr. Wilcox," a voice called from the doorway. A first-year graduate student approached hesitantly. "I was wondering if you might consider advising my thesis on authentication methodologies for digital-born manuscripts." The title, Doctor, wasn't technically accurate, yet had been informally adopted by colleagues and students in recognition of her expertise. The irony wasn't lost on Melody. She had achieved the academic respect Thaddeus had craved through credentials without actually possessing the formal degrees he valued. "I'd be happy to discuss your project," Melody replied, adjusting Iris on her hip. "Email me to schedule a meeting next week." As the student departed, Melody gathered her materials one-handed, a skill perfected through months of balancing motherhood with academic responsibilities. On her desk lay the morning's mail, including an envelope bearing the seal of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences, an invitation to speak at their annual symposium on literary preservation. Next to it sat a smaller personal envelope in familiar handwriting. Inside she found a brief note from Thaddeus. "Melody, I found this while organizing research papers. It belongs with you, as does the recognition it represents." Beneath the note lay a newspaper clipping from 15 years ago, a small article about a collegiate literary analysis competition. In the grainy photo stood 19-year-old Melody Wilcox, accepting first prize for her paper on Emily Dickinson's linguistic patterns, the same methodologies she now taught to graduate students. Thaddeus had somehow located this forgotten moment from her past, evidence that her scholarly path had begun long before they met, independent of his influence or validation. Melody tucked the clipping into her authentication manual, a private reminder that true value exists whether recognized by others or not. Her journey had come full circle, from the young scholar whose academic path was interrupted to the respected expert who had forged her own unique route to recognition. "Time to go home, little one," she whispered to Iris, whose curious eyes, so like her father's in their intensity, yet entirely her own in their wisdom, seemed to understand everything. As they departed the classroom, a small brass plaque beside the door caught the afternoon light. "Wilcox Authentication Laboratory, where authenticity transcends credentials." The space had been dedicated just last week, a permanent acknowledgement of her contributions to the field. Outside, autumn leaves swirled across Harvard Yard, where generations of scholars had walked before her, some with formal pedigrees, others with unconventional paths, all contributing to the endless pursuit of knowledge. Among them now walked Melody Wilcox, carrying her daughter toward a future where true value would always be measured by substance rather than symbols, by authenticity rather than appearances, by the quiet integrity of genuine accomplishment over the hollow echo of credentials without meaning. If this story touched your heart and you want to keep following inspiring and moving stories, be sure to check out our upcoming videos. Subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications to stay updated on new content that can brighten your journey and provide valuable insights. Join us and keep exploring stories that truly matter. I'm sure the next video that pops up on your screen will touch you as well, so click on it now and we'll see you there.